I have lived and worked with people who are outside the mainstream for most of my adult life. I guess you could say people with disabilities. They have become friends, acquaintances, and people I care about. Access is a struggle that I have witnessed that they go through. The fight for equality is their reality. People are objectified and told that they're amazing for doing simple achievements. Why not have the opportunity to be exceptional? Lack of access takes its toll. Access is key.
I think that for the most part, the fear is really based on a misunderstanding of what it's like to be disabled. I completely understand how someone who's not deaf or deafblind, would fear that because they don't have the experience.
How normal is disability? I think that's a question that we want to think about, because if we think about disability as abnormal, we're likely to be afraid of it, because, of course, everybody's afraid of things that are abnormal. So it creates kind of an insulation, doesn't it, where you can protect yourself. The fear allows you to protect yourself and to live with the belief that disability is not normal.
And one of the things I think about when it comes to deafblind people, what is it exactly that they want? Specifically, they want to be understood. They don't want to be feared at all.
When you are blind, when you are deaf, the way that you live your life is actually not that much different than the way you would live if you were not disabled. The real differences lie in the way in which you're able to access, the things in your community, which really doesn't have anything to do with the disability itself, but rather how accommodating your society is being.
What I want from life is everything. I want full access to the community, to the world, to communication. My career goal is to teach writing or English through the internet, but having trouble getting the technology training I need. Or maybe I could teach in a classroom. Why not? I just need an interpreter. Someday that's going to happen.
Well, about 7 years ago, Angie took one of my classes. She contacted me prior to the semester to let me know she had some special needs. I met with Students for Accessibility Services to plan how we would go forward with the semester. She came to class with interpreters. 2 interpreters came to every class, so that was one accommodation. She had a Braille reader that she was using. I think there's a whole lot of technology that goes into how she moves around in the world, but those were the main ones that helped in the class. The signers were incredible. They would always be coming in pairs, so that because Angie uses tactile signing, they would trade after a little while. And then when we had in-class writings, she could also write on that device and read back out loud to the class what she had written. And we did a lot of that as well.
It's so cool being back here because years ago I took 3 writing classes with Catherine Orr. And what was funny about this, I like to write mostly blogs, stories about my life, creative nonfiction, some fiction, but not poetry. I hated poetry. I was afraid of poetry.
Angie came into the class just wanting to write. She already had a degree in special education. She had tried a number of other classes that apparently didn't hold her interest or she did not feel were fully accessible to her. I think she came in with some frustration, having, bumped into classes that she didn't feel fully accommodated. But you can recognize a student who's ready to write. She came in ready to write, she wanted to write, she had a story to tell, and she already knew how to tell it. So being allowed to extend that story into all the different genres that she experimented with, I think was just a joy to her.
So when I was starting the first class, Introduction to Creative Writing, and I went to the store and got this stack of poetry books, I almost dropped out of the class. I said, no way. But then I opened up that first book and started reading, and I realized modern poetry is very different than what we were forced to learn at school. I call myself an accidental poet, and I think that would be a good name for a book someday. This poem is humorous, but it's also to get you to think about, who are you calling amazing? You'll understand in a minute. I'm so amazing. I wake up at noon, don't want to get up. I drag my lazy butt out of bed, enter the bathroom.
I sit on the toilet to have a nice long pee. Then I wash my hands and brush my teeth. Glory be, I'm so amazing. I find some jeans and an oversized sweatshirt. I dress all by myself. My shirt isn't backwards and both shoes are the same color. Look at me, I am so amazing. I stumble down the stairs without falling. I've missed breakfast and I don't want lunch. Eating is too much of a chore, why bother? I grab my laptop and flop into my favorite recliner. The old green chair conforms to my body as if to declare it's my throne. I screw around on the internet all day long. Facebook is my realm and I am the queen. If only I could find a king. When I'm bored with that, I check my email. I reply to the crap while leaving the important stuff for later. Glory be, I'm so amazing. At 7 o'clock, I realize I'm starving, what a shock. I use my advanced culinary skills to make myself a bowl of Lucky Charms. I spill the milk and manage not to cry. Cereal hates me. Each spoonful is milk and plain pieces that taste like cardboard. Where are the blue moons, red balloons, and rainbow pots of gold? On my way back to the recliner, I trip over the dog. My can of Dr. Pepper flies across the room. I rescue the can and let the dog lick up the mess. That's why she has such a bubbly personality. My friend comes over to shoot the breeze. She tells me about the real world. I gossip about what I read on Facebook. Look at me. I'm so amazing. Before she leaves, she tells me I'm inspirational. I just roll my eyes. Yeah, I'm super duper and absolutely wonderful. My chair thinks so too. Glory be, I'm so amazing.
I think that all of us who aren't blind and aren't deaf are surprised about the way a deaf-blind person moves around in the world. And so I was continually surprised by her ability to go through her day meeting the demands that each day brought before her, and to do it so gracefully.
Inspiration porn is a concept that was developed by the disability community to identify situations where a disabled person is being used to give non-disabled people a good feeling. So someone who's deafblind, for example, just doing normal, everyday sorts of things. Depending on how that is framed or interpreted by the person who's viewing it, it can be turned into an inspirational story. Now, there's nothing necessarily wrong about inspiration, but the problem is when a disabled person is objectified so that someone who's non-disabled can have a good feeling.
Or look at it this way. I'm out grocery shopping with my friend, and some random stranger comes over and says, "Watching you makes me feel so inspired." Why? I'm just grocery shopping. Everybody does that. You all do that. Is grocery shopping inspiring? I think not. Consider that middle-aged woman with average height, average weight, brown eyes, brown hair, who keeps cutting you off with her cart. Is she amazing? Well, if I could, I'd cut you off with my cart.
So the question about inspiration porn and why the mainstream community might not realize that it is offensive, and however the individuals who have disabilities may find it offensive, I think kind of hits at human nature quite a bit. So there's nothing wrong with a film or a piece or a story that promotes kindness, right? And I think as human beings, we like to read information that is about kindness in the world. But when we peel off that kindness, I think it's important to begin to think about empowerment. So what was the purpose of the kindness? Was the kindness geared to making me feel good that, oh, I'm a great person, without really thinking about the other? Or was the kindness intended to empower the other so that they would no longer be oppressed? And that way of thinking, I don't think the mainstream is really there yet. So it's really important, I think, for the disabilities communities to keep nudging us and increasing our awareness that the problem isn't with kindness. The world could certainly use more kindness. The problem is with the intent behind the kindness.
Can you even make a documentary about a disabled person without it becoming inspiration porn? And I think it's a complicated issue. However, I think that, yes, you definitely can make a documentary that does not become inspiration porn. It really depends on how you approach it. So for example, is the documentary mainly about some kind of individual issue that the disabled person ultimately overcomes? And are there techniques that are used to give the emotional jolt, the swelling of the music, at the climax, things like that, and especially if whatever that issue is an ordinary, mundane thing. But if the documentary is focusing more on the way in which disability is largely a social phenomenon, if it's focusing on the fact that there aren't adequate services for people with disabilities. Basically, if it has some kind of political message to it, then I think that in and of itself really mitigates this danger that the documentary would just become inspiration porn.
I wanted to be part of the alumni band. I knew I couldn't play, but I wanted to do anything, hold a sign. I didn't care. And Joseph said he was not being mean, but he knows about inspiration porn too, and it bothers him. And he said, yeah, and everybody would cheer about you and say how inspiring and amazing you are. And I thought, he's right. No, I don't want to do that. But I still went to the homecoming game, and I dressed in lots of red, like Red Explosion, because that was the school color. And we cheered, and we talked. We saw Michelle talking to her. We ate junk food. It was fun.
The question about the content of the inspiration porn and what the message that it leaves for the viewer, and particularly a viewer who does not have a lot of experience working or living with someone with the disabilities, might be skewed. And so not only are they witnessing this kindness that, oh, that makes me feel good because there's, I now spent an hour watching kindness, but it also allows them to go about their life feeling that all is well. And it's not until those individuals who are walking around thinking all is well are faced with having to care for or address their own disability or care for somebody else, and they have to begin navigating the system, that they realize, wow, maybe all is not well.
I think that the goal should be, on the part of the filmmaker to do their best to try and counter that way of viewing things, because it is a powerful perspective, that non-disabled individuals have. They want to view things that make them feel good. They want to be inspired when they see a disabled person. But I think that ultimately that's not the responsibility of the filmmaker.
And she's a force. So I was surprised. I was surprised that. I definitely don't want to say how amazing she is, because I'm learning, thanks to Angie, what a person with a disability wants more than being told how inspiring they are, is to be seen by another person, to be seen for who they are.
About 3 years ago, I announced that my goal was to enroll in a Master's in Fine Arts program in creative writing. Well, that's what I did. I graduated in December.
I think the fact that she worked in this low residency program really played to her advantages, because when you see somebody in the classroom and they have some special need, that's all you think about. But when you're dealing with someone online, they're just another person. And I think in that way, it really allowed her to connect in a more meaningful way with the other students. And they were able to look beyond the disability and really get to know Angie as a person. And I heard that a lot, when I asked for their feedback about how much they enjoyed working with Angie. So they were able to see, her great sense of humor and, just get to know her on a more personal level.
Today we're here to listen to several readings from author Angie Orlando. Angie is a teacher, a writer, a mother who happens to be deafblind. She graduated from Kent State University with a bachelor's degree in special education. In 2016, Orlando earned a master's degree in fine arts and creative writing from Ashland University. She is a contributing author of Deafblind Reality, Living the Life. Orlando's work can also be viewed on her blog, Angie C. Orlando, Deafblind and Determined. As the co-founder and president of the Northeast Ohio Deafblind Association, she is passionate about assisting people who are deafblind through awareness, education, and social opportunities. Her organization offers a variety of specialized workshops related to deafblindness. Ladies and gentlemen and people of all genders, thank you so much. Please join me in welcoming Angie Orlando.
Hi, thank you all for coming out here on this windy day. So I have 11 poems or stories to read. And since we're here to celebrate Disability Awareness Month, be aware that it's not a good idea to assume when you're dealing with someone who has a disability. For example, people assume I am born deafblind and born having trouble walking. Not true. I was non-disabled during the first part of my life, then hard of hearing with low vision during the second, and now my third life, I'm fully deafblind and have trouble walking, neuropathy. This poem is from when I was, let's see, the summer between 7th and 8th grade. I struggled to sleep in the baking heat of another humid summer night.
Both windows are open, but offer no relief, not a single fresh breeze. I turn over again, wipe sweat off my brow, and wish like crazy I had a fan. The first helicopter flies overhead in June. It circles endlessly above the house, night after night. Soon there are more, 2, 3, 5, maybe 10. How can anyone sleep with those damn helicopter blades going round and round? I look into my parents' room. Dad is asleep on his back, the yellow sheet rising and falling with each breath. Mom is on her side, one hand resting on the book she was reading as she fell asleep. The two big dogs lie quiet, one on the blue rug, the other half under the bed. Our local newspaper says nothing about helicopters invading Ohio. By July, the racket grows louder. There must be dozens of them. I stick my head out the window. All I see are street lights and stars. Desperate, I ask Chioma, "What's with the helicopters at night?" "What helicopters?" she says. "All I hear is Mrs. Brown's bug zapper." My heart is pounding. "Can't you hear the helicopters?" "What are you talking about? Are you losing your mind, girl?" I force a smile and say, "Psych! Almost got you!" That night, in my hot, dark room, I fear Chioma is right. I'm losing my mind because the rhythmic sound of helicopters fills my head.
The doctors kept saying that hearing aids should help, and I refused to wear them. They were terrible. The doctors told my parents that I was vain, I was lazy, I didn't want to look different from other kids, and I was just being a teenager. I really hated that. But truth is, they didn't work. So finally, in 1990, when I was 16 years old, I got a cochlear implant. And this was back when it was still experimental for children. Insurance would not pay. Sadly, as it turned out, 1 week before my surgery, my grandmother died, and her estate helped pay for the surgery. The cochlear implant surgery, that first one, was really traumatic. I had a hard time with the recovery, getting sick, needed a cane to walk. But I think the cochlear implant helped. Back then I had a box I wore in my pocket and a cord going up. Look. So the problem with having a cochlear implant back then and even today is that automatically means you are going to be oral deaf. You will lip read and you will use your ear, your cochlear implant to hear. But I couldn't understand speech. Maybe if it was one-on-one and quiet, but like I couldn't understand my teachers, but I wasn't allowed to learn ASL. They said if I learned sign language again, I would be lazy and refuse to listen. So cochlear implant was good, but it wasn't a perfect solution. In my MFA classes, students seemed to really like writing poetry about pictures or photographs. I can't really do that, but I do remember a picture, my favorite picture of myself and my brothers. So I wrote about that picture. Here I'd like to introduce you to Tony and Scott. This is called Photograph for Grandma. Two boys on a sunny patio. Younger sister sits in white wicker chair. The oldest brother, Tony, age 17, eyes fixed to the side, peering through the distance 100 miles, longing for the girlfriend he can't live without. His brother, Scott, at 16, knows how to play, angry over missing soccer game, still willing to model for Grandma. White jacket, sleeves rolled up, like Don Johnson in Steubenville Vice. The girl, Angie, age 12, face aglow, innocent, childish smile, basking in Grandma's glory, clutching in her arms, favorite Cabbage Patch doll, its bonnet off, revealing yellow tufts of yarn hair. Grandma's house, 1986. That picture was taken maybe a year before I started losing my hearing. And that sweet girl in that picture had no idea what was in store for her. She was so innocent and clueless.
Tony was 10 years old. He, at school, he was sitting behind a little boy who was hyperactive. The kid threw a pencil and it caught Tony in the eye. When I first found out that Tony was going to be blind, it totally destroyed me. My pride had been I had these 3 perfect, beautiful children. Then all of a sudden, Dr. Brinker sent the kids out and he said, I want to talk to you for a minute. And I was standing there and he said, I don't know how to tell you this, but Tony's going to be blind and so are your other 2 kids. And I just flew back against the wall because I had no idea. I mean, neither one of us had any of this in our family, didn't know what was coming, took me totally by surprise. I was afraid to let him go out and deliver his newspaper, even though the day before he had delivered his newspaper.
It is a shock. You know, you have a 10-year-old kid, life is perfect, and all of a sudden some doctor who just saw the kid, 4 months before that, you know, looks at you as if to say, well, you know, what's the matter with you? You're a bad parent. Did you know your kid had this problem? And it was the same doctor, and it does change your life. I know that ever since that day, I always took the kids to the doctor because, you know, Lois got bad news and always feared going to the doctor with the kids.
It took me a long time to realize that we were on a slow journey that was going to take a while. So I would say There was a lot of grief going on at that time and healing from it.
Since my disability is genetic, it impacts most of my family. Of course, my parents were carriers, but there was no way they couldn't have known. It was just one of those nasty time bombs everybody carries in their DNA. They feel guilty, like somehow it was their fault. My parents want to take care of and protect me. I want to be as independent as possible. I don't want to be a burden or be treated like a child.
My interest in disability within the medical field begins, at least in part, from my early student experiences when I realized that there were a lot of situations that I wasn't taught and didn't learn things that were important in the care of patients, and that continued throughout my training. And I recognized that the gap that I had was not particular to me, but that it was a widespread gap in medical education. And by that I mean there's a lack of coverage in medical education generally regarding the meanings of disability for persons with disability and for their family members. You're not just going to be seeing well patients in your clinical experiences. You'll be seeing persons with disabilities. And in order to provide the best care for persons with disabilities, you need to have some substantive understanding about their lived experiences and about the meanings of their disabilities.
Norma began to slip away when I was in first grade and Tony was in sixth grade. Some kids were screwing around and he got hit in the eye with a pencil. When the doctors were treating him for the injury, they discovered he had retinitis pigmentosa, RP. He would gradually lose his peripheral vision and couldn't see in the night. When I was 13, I started losing my hearing. The doctor said that because Tony had RP and I was hard of hearing, that I must have Usher syndrome. They assumed that later I would begin losing my vision. They were half right. At age 16, I was diagnosed with RP, but genetic testing later ruled out Usher syndrome in my family. So that was my second life when I was hard of hearing with low vision. I could read print and understand voice by lip reading and hearing with my cochlear implant. Okay. I graduated from college, moved to Maryland, where I got married, then had a baby, Joseph, who is now 16. And when he was 6 months old, something happened, I don't know what, but I rapidly lost all my vision and hearing, problems with neuropathy, couldn't walk. People had to dress me, feed me, put me on a potty chair. They communicated by using their finger to print letters on my face. And there was a great deal of pain, nerve pain. Doctors couldn't say what was wrong. Time passed. I started to get a little better. I regained feeling in my hands, started learning tactile sign language and Braille. My legs regained some strength. I can walk now. Not perfectly, but I can walk. I wear leg braces and use a forearm crutch. And so starts my third life. My last poem that I'm going to read today is called In the Dark. Do you live in the dark?
You expect me to say yes. What does a blind person see? You think I'll say black. I see swirls of psychedelic colors, hundreds of white lifesavers on a yellow background with hues of pink and green peeking through the holes. Red and blue spill across the scene, while purple and orange shoot from the bottom like flames, always moving, rolling, swirling. So it goes on, and you might suspect I'm on a bad acid trip. Black would be a blessing. Today, I'm coming in from the garage with extra toilet paper. As I stumble through the kitchen, I bump into a chair and fall. The 4 rolls of toilet paper go flying. Don't ask me where, I'm blind, remember? I'm on my hands and knees, feeling around for the toilet paper. I bang my head repeatedly because that's what happens when you crawl as a blind person. Rolls 1 and 2 turn up quickly. Roll 3 is tricky. God only knows where roll 4 landed. Why did my parents name me Angela? I'm supposed to be God's faithful messenger. Instead, I'm on my knees looking for toilet paper. Do not fear, I am not in the dark. I turned on the kitchen light.
Disabled people are people too, just like us. They have their strong points and their weaknesses. They have their hopes and their fears.
This way, perfect. And in, and back into the water.
And there are successes and there are failures. And they're no different. They do things differently. And sometimes the things they do differently might look threatening to some of us, but they're no different than we are. And that's the important thing to take from this.
Having a dual sensory impairment affects your history as a deaf-blind individual. So for instance, if you were born with normal hearing and you lost it later in life, that will affect your language development because your first language would most likely be the language that surrounds you in your community. So in our case, English may be your first language.
I sign into her hands when I communicate with her, and I use a lot of ASL, American Sign Language signs, but I typically do it in English word order because she grew up speaking English, so that's her first language. So I think that makes it easier for her to understand. I've learned throughout the years that there are certain ways to ask a question. So when sometimes she thinks that you're just making a statement, when in reality you're trying to ask her something. So sometimes you can add things at the beginning, I found, of your sentences to say, I'm getting ready to ask you a question, so that in her head she knows this is a question, not something you're just telling me. It makes it a little bit easier for the communication to go back and forth.
If you were born deaf, your first language may or may not be American Sign Language. For about half of the population of deaf-blind individuals, they have a type of Usher syndrome. And even among those 3 types of Usher syndrome, it affects their personal history. So if you're born hard of hearing, you may have enough access to spoken English that English will be your first language. If you have a profound hearing loss, you may have attended the School for the Deaf, for example, and therefore your first language may be American Sign Language. And depending on when you lost your vision, you may or may not be able to read Braille. You may or may not want to sign in English sentence order if English was your first language and you lost more hearing through aging. You may want more of an English syntax to the way you sign. So you'll see sort of two groups within the sign language, those who know sign language, those who use and know and understand American Sign Language, and those who may use a more English-based sign system.
The likelihood of us having 3 deaf-blind students in one school is very unusual. We've never had 3 deaf-blind students all at one time before, and we probably never will again, especially considering that the 3 girls are all of an age. 2 of them are only 3 months apart in age, and the other one is just a year older. Our students have the opportunity to interact with other deaf and hard of hearing students and other hearing students. They spend some considerable time in the regular classroom, and we have interpreters at every grade level, and they also have their own close interpreter.
Yeah, I'm gonna bring on my mom, my dad, my sister, Janaya, and Jada. Come on, let's all go sit. Okay. All right. We're gonna go to the theater. We're gonna sit down. We're gonna get some drinks and some popcorn. And oh my gosh, that's Michaela. She's on the big screen. That is me.
A support service provider is basically a guide who usually knows sign language or the preferred method of communication with a deaf-blind individual. So they may escort them to certain places, they may provide transportation, they may provide some light-duty type of interpreting. They also provide additional assistance with getting meals or getting objects, purchasing things in stores, reading labels for things around the house, reading mail, perhaps, and general, sort of guidance.
As far as the support service provider is physical, which is different than regular interpreting. But they overlap a lot because when you're out and about grocery shopping, you might run into a friend and then you go into the interpreter role. When I first started working with her, I was actually terrified because you're responsible for her bodily safety out in the world. So just interpreting in general, there's a lot of social skills involved, a lot of subtle, soft skills that, you don't get direct instruction about in your classes. You can feel a little bad sometimes when you have bad interactions or you learn things the hard way or whatever, because it's a sensitive situation. You're trying to be there for somebody who would rather be by themselves. I'm sure any deaf person, or Angie, would prefer to just go, do their business without an interpreter, which is probably how I would feel. That's just caretaking in general. The SSP, it overlaps the caretaker and interpreter in one. In caretaking, people think it's easy just to be nice and take care of people. And even sometimes my husband would say oh, you're gonna go help Angie. I'm like, no, I'm gonna go to work, Yeah, I guess there are some drawbacks that you just have to take it as they come and don't take it too personally, and just try to take direction from the deaf or deaf-blind person.
So tactile American Sign Language is used by the deaf-blind community who have American Sign Language as their first language. These are typically people born profoundly deaf, and often will attend the residential school for the deaf and learn American Sign Language at the school for the deaf, and they automatically sort of make adjustments when they talk to each other. So tactile American Sign Language has developed from visual American Sign Language.
I was asked to do a presentation about deaf-blind culture and cross culture, how we deal with deaf and blind, how it all fits together. So this is my theory. This is how I think about it. It's like a Venn diagram in math. There are two big circles. This one's deaf and this one's blind. You push them together so they partly overlap. That's deaf-blind, right? We are deaf, we are blind, so we're in that little middle. For some deaf-blind people, that might be true, but most do not fit there. The way I see it, there's two big circles, blind and deaf. And then way, way out here, there's a tiny little island. It's labeled deaf-blind. The word deaf-blind is bigger than the island. We spell it deaf-blind, capital D, capital B, no hyphen, no space. It's one word because it's one condition, a unique condition with its own set of needs and services and problems. Recently, I had the opportunity to meet a deaf woman who has studied protactile, and it was just totally amazing. She kept her hand on me the whole time, whether we were communicating or other person was. She never let go. She did protactile signals, or she just touched. For those 15 minutes, I felt alive. I felt electrified, like I was really part of the world, part of the communication, part of life. And I loved it. So protactile is all about touch, touch, touch. And that's my sense of touch is my whole world. My fingers are 10 little eyes, and my palms are ears. I do everything with my hands.
Protactile ASL includes back-channeled information, how visual and environmental information is conveyed to a person. Information or communication can sometimes happen on someone's back, for example. As an interpreter and a researcher, I don't speak for deafblind people. This is information that I've been told by the deafblind community, and from what they've reported to me, their number one characteristic is touch. It's always touch. As a marginalized group, deafblind persons struggle when trying to interact with the general community due to not having access to visual or sound-based communication. So the solution is touch. It's a basic human connector. Just like a mother would bond with her infant, it's touch. Deafblind people connect through touch. Deaf people use touch with others as well to connect, but it's more so utilized with visual cues and gestural signals. Hearing people dismiss deaf people, and deaf people dismiss deafblind people as well. So what do we do to connect? Touch.
My experience with deafblind culture and the deafblind world began in the late 1970s at Gallaudet University with a deafblind gentleman named Art Rohrig. He was the head of deafblind services at Gallaudet, and I was his assistant. Prior to that, he had taken a sculpture class, and he had made several different sculptures, and one of them was a mermaid. And I admired it so much, he thought that he would give it to me, so he gave it to me very kindly, and I held on to it for many years. And a couple years ago, I ran into Art at a deafblind conference, the Ohio Association of the Deafblind, and he greeted me, and we reminisced for a while. And I told him that I had a special surprise for him. I wanted to present something to him. So I presented him with the mermaid sculpture that he had made me so many years ago, probably 40 years ago. And immediately, he recognized it through touch. And that to me just showed the power that touch has in the deafblind community.
She's got a sad look on her face, doesn't she?
Let me take a look at her. Oh, yes, she does. You're right, she does.
I did this sculpture from memory, from seeing it in Denmark in 1973. I remember seeing the sad facial expression and the way that the statue was positioned on a rock. The statue is actually in the city of Copenhagen. I visited the statue there and recall it vividly. Then I took a class and made a sculpture out of clay. Yes, I do remember this very clearly. Unbelievable.
A huge thank you to the Cleveland Museum of Art for all of their support and all of the events that they have provided, in addition to the Tactile Carnival Games that were here. Thank you, thank you, thank you. This day would not have been possible without all of our volunteers.
Wait, hold on, I want to give her this one. Here we go.
Protectile is a socio-cultural movement. It's continuing to add, and it's growing, spreading around the country. There are research articles on it. There's new language, what they're calling protectile ASL. So protectile is what's binding us together, what's making us, in this little island, a culture. More and more people are identifying as not deaf or blind, but as deaf-blind, one word.
I think the reason why there's not as much awareness amongst disabled individuals themselves has a lot to do with the communities that they're a part of. I mean, really, the place that you get a lot of, your sense of the political significance of disability is through a community. So, for example, I had been losing my sight progressively over time. So there was a point in my life when I actually was mostly sighted. And as I went through the process of losing my sight, I didn't have a community of blind people to help me understand and interpret my experiences and the situations that I would find myself in. And that was very difficult. It definitely made me feel isolated. And I didn't realize how much until I had lost enough sight where I kind of, really wanted to reach out and find other blind people to find out, like, how are they living? What's their experience? Is it like mine? So after I had done that, that's when I really started to become aware of just how much of the experiences of blind people are shaped by the kinds of communities in which we are living. So, but unfortunately, a lot of disabled people don't have that. They're not living in a community with other people who have the same kind of disability. They might not know anyone who has a disability. They're living amongst just non-disabled people. And that can be very difficult because it's hard to get a really good perspective on what you're experiencing if there's no one else around you who is like you. So I think that one way that people can become more aware of the political significance of their disabilities and become more active is to find communities of people who are experiencing the same things that they are. And then it just seems like once you have that, the political awareness kind of naturally starts to grow.
that the perception of the sighted community has just what I had mentioned before, has a dim view, if you will, no pun intended, of what someone can do. And our mission is to...
I've had all kinds of comments when we've gone to speak at a senior center, different places. People, usually when I walk in with my cane, they think I have a prop, and
you can't possibly be blind or
yeah,
low vision.
How do you get dressed? You know, another guy said, oh, I envisioned somebody who can't see just sitting off in a corner somewhere not doing anything.
5 years of being away. I'm very impressed with the planning committee and what they've done for this conference. And I'm really very proud to see all of this that has happened.
We're here this weekend to celebrate the Ohio Association of DeafBlind 25th anniversary. So that's why I look a little tired from planning this conference for over a year. And so we're happy that this is happening, and everybody seemed to be happy, having a good time.
It was very important to me. It's just, I'm so inspired that we have more DeafBlind coming than what we did before. So my heart is a 25-year anniversary. I'm just lucky to be alive, and I'm here to enjoy myself for 25 years.
I just feel that, we were making successful progress in the development of services for people who are deafblind in the past. There was awareness within the government, and changes occurred over the years. And I guess it's just sad that because of funding and federal cuts on services, one of the main programs in Ohio, the DeafBlind Outreach Program, that was shut down because of funding. It is really crucial that there is visibility and that deafblind people would get these services, and that there would be advocacy for deafblind people to continue to receive services. And I know it is a very, very complicated situation, but deafblind people and deaf people as well really need support services so that they can continue to be independent and to have jobs and to have support services in order to have a quality of life.
We were in a pretty bad accident, and I got the helicopter ride and the whole bit. And shortly after that, there were all these people coming in talking to Angie, and they were amazed that she knew how to make out a grocery list. Well, duh. Yeah, she'd been doing it. She'd been married. And they thought she could easily live by herself. So all these people were coming in, and all these people were going to provide all these services. They were going to provide transportation. They were going to provide help with housekeeping, homemaking, teaching her how to do things. I think the only thing they didn't say they were going to help her with was paying her bills and managing her money. But as soon as she moved, it was like, oh, wait a minute. We don't have the people to provide that. We don't have the money in our budget to provide that. So none of it happened.
I certainly have experienced various instances of discrimination, such as miscommunication and misunderstandings. In talking about discrimination, well, like for example with voting. 2 years ago, I asked the state for an exemption on the typical voting ballot in favor of a Braille ballot. They said no, that they didn't have anything like that to facilitate my ability to vote. They told me that a sighted person would have to tell me what was on the ballot, and then the information be written down for me. So that was obviously an example of discrimination. Also, last year, I showed up at the polling place and told them I was deafblind and there to vote. A woman said, "Oh, not to worry, we have a technological accessory for you," and I thought it could maybe connect to my Braille machine. But the piece of technology they were using was based on sound, and I am deaf and can't hear the sound the machine made. They had to eat their words, and obviously were not aware of the cultural aspects of being deafblind.
What people should be afraid of is becoming disabled in a community that is not accommodating, that doesn't value inclusion of people with a variety of types of bodies. So I think reframing it in that way can actually be very helpful, because if that's what we're afraid of, then I think it's going to motivate people to do something about it, so that when we inevitably acquire disabilities, either through accident or even just through the aging process. Most people by the end of their life, if they live long enough, are going to have one or more disabilities. And that's a much less fearful prospect if you know that you're living in a community that is set up to allow you to live an independent and normal life.
I think there are a number of reasons why full inclusion practices are not standard practice within the community, and part of it has to do with providing the person who has the disability with a voice to guide what that full inclusion practice would look like. And there, from my perspective, appears to be a communication gap between the individuals who have the funding and their ability to hear what the people with disabilities are saying that they need. And on the flip side, people with disabilities may be communicating in a way that might be difficult for the people who are developing the programs to be able to really comprehend and integrate. So I think that there's, at the foundational level, there's communication difficulties that impair the ability to hear the other side. And part of that communication problem has to do with power differential, that individuals in power who have the money, they are, they have a sense of what is best and what they're going to do. And so it makes it even harder to hear something that might not jive with what they might think is the best thing to do.
She's often left out. I see Angie in the hallway at Kent State University, and people, well, deaf people, just walk right by her without saying anything. I mean, rarely do they stop and say hello or try to get her attention. And for whatever reason, they're so bold to choose to ignore her. It doesn't rank their attention or waste of time. I mean, they literally walk right past her and don't say a word to her. Not a hello. I mean, nothing. My fear, or a big fear for me, is becoming blind, and I think that most deaf people fear becoming blind as well. And if that were the case, I would want people to show me that courtesy too. Don't make me feel like I just sit alone, not included with people walking past me and blatantly ignoring me. I mean, maybe there's someone I haven't seen in a long time and I get a big thrill out of talking to people and you just pass me by. I mean, that just strikes me as astounding. It shows a lack of compassion. It's just not cool at all.
When it comes to deafblind people not being provided the access they need, it's very frustrating to me as an interpreter, but more so as a human being. And I can't grasp as to why it's not happening. And it's kind of like we're always told, you live in America, you live in the best, you have the best, da da da. I think we need to practice what we preach. I really do. Why is it such a hard thing to get a person who is visually impaired and cannot hear transportation?
In Ohio, there are no services specifically for people who are deafblind. You need to find the services somewhere in your community, in your county. Like, for example, transportation. In Portage County, we have a transportation center called PARTA, and they do door-to-door transportation for people with disabilities, paratransit. It was okay. I went through mobility training and learned how to navigate Satterfield Hall, where my classes were. But we kept having problems. One of the biggest things, I'm sitting on a bench near the door. They're supposed to come in and tap me. But they don't. They would say I didn't come out for the bus, and then they would leave. Well, of course I didn't go out for the bus. I didn't know the bus was there. But it's serious too. Like, for example, they were supposed to take me to a certain door, but sometimes they would drop me off at a different door, and I didn't know where I was. Didn't know how to find the elevator. Sometimes I would wander, panicked, hoping I'd find something would recognize, something on the wall. Many times I had to just call out, "Somebody help me find the elevator," and a person would guide me to the elevator. The worst time, they took me to the wrong building. So they left me at the door, and I noticed something's wrong. The floor feels wrong. Walk in a little further. This is wrong. Something is wrong. So I called out for help. Can somebody please help me? Someone came over. I explained how she could use print on palm to communicate with me. I asked, "Is this Satterfield Hall?" She says, "No." I'm like, oh my gosh. I just wanted to freak out, but I had to stay calm, figure this out. "Where am I?" I asked her. She says, "Bowman." "Okay, thank you." I got on my machine, contacted my dad. He contacts PARTA, very upset. They said, "Okay, they'll come get me." They took me, guided me out, walking down some stairs I almost fell, and then left me at a new door. It was Satterfield Hall, but it was the wrong door. And so again, I'm struggling to find where I am so that I can go to my class. I stopped using PARTA.
I think that services for deafblind individuals are definitely not adequate to their needs at this point. I mean, a lot of this has to do with the fact that civil rights laws like the ADA, they don't really go far enough in offering the kinds of services that someone would need who has the kind of situation where they need more communication, from like a transportation service, for example. Someone who's deafblind, it's going to be unlikely that someone who is driving a transportation vehicle is going to know how to communicate with someone who's deafblind.
If you and Tom were in a car, you're driving, he sees a deer, he tells you to slow down, there's a deer, you don't slow down in time, you hit the deer, you guys have an accident, an ambulance comes, ambulance takes both of you. So far, everything's covered for your insurance, third-party insurances and everything will cover everything. The ambulance ride to the hospital, you break your leg, you end up having to have surgery because of your broken leg. Surgery's covered. Tom has to have a surgery. He has some kind of a concussion, a head injury, and he has to have a surgery. The surgery's covered, but it leaves him blind. The day the two of you get to leave the hospital, you leave and they give you a list of places that you can have rehabilitation services for physical therapy. You're going to have physical therapy maybe for 6 to 8 weeks, and here's some facilities you can go to. Here's a set of crutches, and you might even need a walker. Might even give you one of those fancy little scooters, all covered by insurance. Tom goes to the door and they say, sorry, there's no coverage. Rehabilitation for blindness is not covered.
Coordination of services is kind of a tricky topic because the different service agencies will have their own philosophy, and they have their own budgets, and they have their own guidelines. And to be able to, again, communicate across agencies means that the agency needs to not feel threatened for its own livelihood, that if we do collaborate, if we do coordinate services, they won't necessarily lose clients to the other agencies. That competition, that fear of competition, I think really can hurt individuals with disabilities.
This past fall, we had trouble with the hot water tank. The pilot light kept going out. Boy, I took 4 cold baths in 1 month. That was not fun. So my dad would relight the pilot light, say, hey, it's fixed, and then it would go out again. Finally, after about 6 weeks, he called the landlord and got someone there to check it. He changed the control panel. Good, that fixed the problem, but I was smelling something. It smelled like rotten eggs, and I knew that meant a gas leak. But nobody else could smell it, and nobody believed me. The gas leak continued. For 2 months, I was living in an apartment with gas leak, and I was terrified. Then the heater cut out in winter. Don't know why. It was blowing air, but it was blowing cold air. Finally, get repairman there. He looks, nothing wrong with it. So I'm freezing and there's a gas leak. Finally, I called a friend to come over, and she and her husband came over, looked at the house. He could smell the gas leak, and he confirmed that the heater was blowing cold air. Well, why do I need somebody else to confirm what I've been saying for 2 months? My friend turned off the hot water tank and the heater came back on. We called the gas company. Person from the gas company came over, said the hot water tank was leaking gas. He shut it off. He taped instructions right there onto the hot water tank. Finally, the repairman fixed it. For real. It took 3 months total to go through that whole process.
And then it becomes, and it's also the power differential, because we have what normal is and the outliers. There's this power differential that kind of enables the person, the able-bodied person, when they don't get it, to say, well, I don't get it because you're disabled, versus I don't get it because I can't take your perspective, and I need to spend time and energy listening to what you're trying to tell me.
In looking at services for people in Ohio, the services offered are not very accessible or friendly for deafblind people who live in the state. Also, in the deafblind community of Ohio, there are widespread obvious deficiencies there. Overall estimates are around 1,500 to 2,000 deafblind individuals in the state of Ohio, and there is no standardization among them. There are multiple diverse groupings. For example, there are deafblind people who are ASL signers. Some use English exclusively without using sign language. Some are hard of hearing. Some have been born hearing sighted and became deafblind all of a sudden. Community services and training programs are extremely, extremely limited in Ohio.
Less than 10% of the services covered are through any type of state or federal funding. Everything else is all fundraising, donations out of his pocket, your pocket, my pocket, grants.
70 to 80% of the people who are blind and want to work or are
Either
unemployed.
Unemployed or underemployed.
Right.
Oh, I knew from a very early age that I wanted to be a teacher. In college, I was completely career focused. I wanted to be a special education teacher working with children with severe developmental disabilities. Out in the real world, it was much harder. I was met with major discrimination at the 2 jobs I tried. First time I resigned. The second time I was getting ready to fight and I was going to contact a disabilities rights attorney. That's when my disabilities worsened, and I have not worked since then.
We are humans. We all have feelings. We want to be loved. We want things to be fair, equality for us all, and not to be looked upon as less than. Maybe someone feels like they can't do something or they're struggling, and if that's the case, we lift them up to do the best that they can. We expect that.
You won't be able to graduate from this medical school without understanding the pathophysiology and pharmacologic treatment of congestive heart failure. What are you going to know at the time of graduation of the varieties of federal, state, and local resources for persons with disabilities, some of which are legal entitlements? What are you going to know at the time of graduation about the varieties of resources available for families having a member affected with a disability? When someone graduates medical school, they're taught a lot and are very proficient usually in anatomy and in knowing physiology and pathophysiology and in knowing a lot about infectious disease and many other types of clinical conditions and becoming a good diagnostician and knowing what medications to give in different clinical contexts and knowing when to recommend a surgical approach. And all of those are extremely important things. But I'd submit that what is not taught in most medical schools is this idea of the meanings of disability. And if the essence of medicine is to assist persons with disability and to limit or eradicate pain and suffering and to enable people to achieve their maximum potentials, I think you have to know about the meanings of the disability for that person and for the persons they relate to in the home and in their school environment or in their work environment. And absent that component of their education, it's going to be hard, if not impossible, to be the best physician they otherwise could be.
I believe that in some ways having a disability has changed who I am. What I've gone through has made me stronger and more adaptable. I'm not doing what I plan to do, but I'm still me. I just do things in a different way. Some people are overcome by pity when they see me. All they can see are the disabilities. I know I look pathetic, but I don't want anyone's pity. I drink Dr. Pepper, I read vampire novels. That's who I am, that's the real person. You need to take the time to talk to your patients, find out what they like, how they're feeling, get to know them, look past the disabilities, and find out who they really are. Then there are my brothers. I believe Tony had FARC. At age 38, he could still read large print. He used a scanning cane. He had a lot of trouble with depression. Even though his hearing was normal and he could walk fine, he had a much harder time coping with his limitations. He finally decided to give up. Tony committed suicide 10 years ago. His funeral was on what would have been his 39th birthday.
I think that was obviously it was a very difficult time for their family. I didn't know Tony that well except as, the cool older brother. He was in a band back when we were in high school, and Angie would get us tapes of the band because, they were really the cool people.
I used to tell him all the time, Tony, you got to slow down. You can't solve the world's problems, and that's the way he was. If you look into suicides, and I did look into some of this stuff, pull down some stories about it and everything, and I think a lot of the medications have an effect. He was taking medications for depression, and of course when you take medications for depression, they give you a lot of extra things too. Take an Ativan, because that's making you sleepy. Take this, take that. Well, he had hurt his knee, I believe it was, trying to do an exercise class with his fiance, and so they gave him painkillers. So I think in his case, and just something snapped. It wasn't something he planned. There were no signs there.
It's not exactly clear, but I do know that he killed himself when he was in Chicago. He moved to Chicago with a fiance, I believe, and things seemed to be going fine, and then all of a sudden, suicide. It's just so heavy. I still can't make sense out of it. Even though it happened a while ago, I just still can't believe it because it's just odd. However, when I really think about it, it's just hard to process. Maybe internally he felt frustrated with the world. He tried to be an advocate. Maybe he felt like his quality of life was becoming worse. His vision was deteriorating. Even worse, his hearing was deteriorating. And I think he really questioned the meaning of life.
I know Angie had a lot to work through with that, and of course having the same issues that Tony had, and she's chosen a very different way to approach her life, I think, than Tony did.
The services that would be available for our students when they leave school is still in question. I don't know, I think it's very difficult for students to be able to access services. We try to prepare them for life after high school. They would have to be able to access community services, which are very different from being in one location and having all the services come in to you.
There's the buttons. That's the door.
So an example of access that Angie experienced was when she was invited to the West Virginia School of Osteopathic Medicine, and she was a guest speaker and was put up in a very nice condo on a golf course. We had meals brought in, and the co-navigator, SSP, brought the spa items that we use, like nail polish and things like that, to have a spa night. Then the next day, Angie went and spoke to a crowd of about 200 medical students at the school.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for coming. Please make sure that you've signed in. You are in for a very special treat today, something that a lot of medical schools don't get to experience. I first became familiar with Ms. Angie Orlando when I was a fellow in molecular genetic pathology at the Cleveland Clinic. One of my attending physicians, Dr. Marvin Natovitz, was in charge of presenting the disability material to the Cleveland Clinic medical students. And he invited me to tag along to the presentation. So I said, okay, I'll go. During the presentation, Angie was one of the presenters for the session, and the presentation was very thought-provoking to me. It really made me think of things that I had not really thought much about before, even though I'd already been through medical school, 1 residency, and 1 fellowship. So I thought, well, what really is a disability? What is it like to live with a disability? How does the disabled person feel about being disabled? What type of attitudes do we or should we have as physicians, friends, relatives, employers, and so on, towards someone who has a disability?
The more general diagnosis of deafblind is still rare. There are few services available, and most are shutting down because of budget cuts. Ohio does not have a state program for service providers to work with deafblind people. Because I'm on SSDI and I get child support, my income is too high for me to qualify for services for people from my local County Board of Developmental Disabilities or services for independent living. That just seems ironic. I'm on SSDI and I get Medicare and I don't qualify for services. I could pay for a Medicaid waiver, but ironically I can't afford it. So I worry about my future. In 2 years, Joseph will turn 18. I will lose part of my SSDI and child support, even though he will most likely still be living with me. I don't know what I'm going to do, and the day is coming soon.
It was just very well attended and very professional. Then we made our way home, and lo and behold, we found out that the power had gone out in Kent. And so Angie had to go back to her apartment with no access to the internet, and the power was completely out.
When a deafblind person wants to do what we as hearing people do, work, be citizens, pay taxes, and they can't or are not allowed or accommodated, they're stuck. Self-esteem, this is a sign, it's gone. Self-esteem, and they're lonely. So I feel bad because I feel, what can I do to help if they can't find a job? There are so many people who are deaf and blind who are not working, who are skilled, who are talented. We need to do better, all of us. There's something that every single person can do, all of us. Everybody's a teacher in a way. And I think we just need help one, help another, and pull each other up, because it's not fair and it's not going to get any better. And it's not fair that a person with deaf blindness has to sit at home and wait for someone to come over and touch their hands.
Yeah. yeah, I'm a little bit worried to leave because, you know, she usually can text out if she needs anything. And when power's out, she can't access the internet, so not only will she be bored, but a little bit in danger. So, but we know that her dad's gonna take care of it, and he lives right down the road, so.
Do you live in the dark? You expect me to say yes. Do not fear. I am not in the dark. I turned on the kitchen light.
Thank you.